Hey there, marketers. Monique Ruiz here again with yet another Fireside Chat. This time we're talking about multi channel acquisition campaigns, aka those campaigns you run across all channels, from email to social, display, podcast, audio, and more, to gain new customers. This month's expert for our Fireside Chat is Quinn Jalli, SVP of Email Products here at Claritas. Hi, Quinn. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks, Monique. It's great to get to be able to chat with you about this topic.
We're excited to have you. So let's start the chat out with you giving our viewers a little bit of an overview of your role here, since despite it only calling out email products and name, you're much more well rounded than that single channel.
Yeah, excuse me. No, I oversee all campaign execution across all digital channels, as well as kind of dipping my toe into the privacy conversation there. So, yeah, I get to wear multiple hats here at Claritas, and it's a lot of fun because I never know what the next where it's gonna take me. So,
That's the beauty of working here.
it is indeed. It is indeed.
So I know you've been working with our team on a few kind of thought leadership activities. So we're
Yeah.
excited to see those come out in the next few months. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and jump into these questions.
Yeah.
And I want to start by getting a little bit of a lay of the land. So, how are consumers engaging with media today versus 10 years ago, or even as recent as pre pandemic?
Yeah, so I think the real seminal marker is 2 years ago, right? I mean, I think that's the interesting thing. We used to think in decades, but now I got to think. Now we have a line of demarcation that is pre and post pandemic. I mean, if we're going to call it post pandemic, if it's even there yet. And I think in the interesting phase is we consume in much more what I believe tranche based consumption because people they get on their computer, but since we're sitting at our computer by ourselves in our houses now, all alone, our computer's kind of our outlet to the outside world. We don't window shop anymore. I mean, I live in New York City, but I can't tell you the last time I walked up Madison Avenue and
Mm,
looked around as much as I love doing that. So I think we consume media pretty aggressively throughout the day. But I think there is, and this is a sample size of one, so I'll confess that to our listeners that we have not taken a mass panel of this. But my instincts tell me, and our readership of email tells me when we look at how the way consumers are opening and clicking on emails, people stop pretty definitively at the end of the day, at the end of the workday. So, I think marketers have to take that into account that, hey, emails are not just advertising new products. It is allowing our consumers to window shop where they can't do it anymore. But it also has to be done in delivered during the workday because I think people get tired. We're at home staring at our computers, and at the end of the day, we're going to shut down.
yeah,
So I think it is a much different consumption pattern than pre-pandemic. So,
yeah, I'd agree with
uh,
that. So,
yep.
hearing you talk a little bit about that sort of evolution of consumer engagement, it makes me wonder has the diversity of available online and offline channels changed the consumer purchase journey? And
Yeah,
if
that's
so,
a great
how?
question. Yeah, I think the mix. So first of all, I think more than ever, just because of the diversification of digital channels, we have to think about things with a little more strategic eye. For instance, just even 7, 8 years ago, we only had really Facebook, right?
Yeah,
Now we have Instagram. Now we have TikTok. What we used to be just we're going to advertise and display in social now becomes we're advertising and display and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and they're all very different audiences.
yeah,
And so, first of all, right off in just the last 5 years, the way we approach the channels has to be viewed differently, right? I mean, we just now I think the fact that people are locked in their houses and then just coming out of those shells has also changed that. I mean, I think we consume, a lot of evidence suggests we are consuming direct mail a little more voraciously than we might otherwise have had because, again, we're not leaving the house. But I think at the end of the day, I think people are, again, more attentive to the digital media they are getting because it is the window shopping they can't do on their own. I don't think necessarily, though, it is any more or less effective, but I think it is more integral to every big brand's advertising strategy. So, I think everybody now realizes, hey, we have to reach out to people. I mean, you look at car industry, right?
yeah,
Where they used to be advertising new cars, now they're advertising things like oil changes and recalls and even used car sales where you wouldn't have thought of advertising that 2 years ago. So it
right.
is it has become where we are using digital media to advertise to people in very different ways because the world has changed.
Hmm.
So yeah.
So you mentioned kind of the diversity of channels and their impact on the consumer purchase journey. Can you go into a little more depth into the ways that marketers can gain insight into how specific channels do impact consumer purchase behaviors?
Well, yeah. So it's interesting because I think there's two reasons we do a multi-channel campaign, and I think that's going to play into my answer here, which is the first is the well-known concept of amplification, right? We touch it first, say in email, and then we touch it in display to amplify the message, right? We reinforce the message that we're sending to
Mm-hmm.
you. But also, there's a concept I've been playing with for the last 3 years called, channel bias. And we're seeing more and more evidence of it, that there are people who don't purchase things in email, or they don't go to their email religiously. Their email is there for when they need something. I bought something 3 days ago. I'm returning it. So now I'm going to go to my email to find that receipt. There are people like me who check email every 12 seconds, right? I mean, because I'm afraid I'm getting that's a note from my CEO about something that I did incorrectly or that I did well, and I'm looking for the praise, right? It's a very different consumption pattern. My girlfriend goes to email when she is looking for something, and only when she's looking for
Mm-hmm.
something. She spends a lot of time of her time on TikTok. I spend a lot of time on Instagram. I spend no time on Facebook. I spend no
Mm-hmm.
time on TikTok. I'm very,
Yeah.
chit. And I think where I'm going with this is that, the way we communicate with people is much about amplifying a message in the marketing world, as well as to make sure that we are presenting the offer in the channel that they're going to engage with it. So when you're looking at how you're talking to your audience, you have to look at it not only of can we reinforce the message across multiple points, but are we going to be there to that in that consumer's channel with the right message? And so you may have the ideal, and I use this analogy all the time, you may have the ideal consumer for your product. But when you're looking at that consumer, we have to make sure that when we present the ideal offer, it's in the ideal channel.
Right.
So that's really, I think, to me, what multi-channel has become more about. And I think we've way overstated the amplification and way understated the channel bias. And I think more and more marketers are going to be looking at multi-channel campaigns
Yeah.
as a way to communicate to consumers in the way they like to be communicated with. So,
Right. Right.
and it is becoming more specific, right? I mean, in 2005, when I got into this industry, there was really only two channels: display and email. Social really wasn't a thing. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
advertised on LinkedIn or MySpace. That's it.
Yeah.
Ooh, boy, I'm having flashbacks there. 2006, you get Facebook, and suddenly we start thinking about advertising. But I mean, it has evolved so rapidly over such a short time. It's dizzying.
Yeah.
So
It keeps marketers on their toes for sure.
it does. Yes, indeed.
So when it comes to acquisition, or as they may be more commonly known, those prospecting campaigns,
Yeah.
are there channels that seem to do a better job of generating initial interest in a product or service?
But so that, again, I think that's interesting. When we look at the responses, right? It is really, I'm going to call it demographic specific. We find that for people over the age of 40, email and Facebook work really well. If you're looking for women over 55, there is only one channel. It's Facebook, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it is amazing. Over 55, it becomes like 80% women with it, and they're all very involved. Under 45, you start to get into that Instagram area. And I think display amazingly skews younger generation, which is
Mhm.
very interesting. The only explanation, and it is the only explanation I can give for it, is that people who are my age, 50 and older, just inherently don't trust display, right? When we were young, display was clickbait. Now it
Mhm.
is, there's a lot more rigor applied to what gets advertised over display. We don't have as much clickbait out there. And so people inherently of a younger generation trust it with a lot more discerning eye than the older generations do. Now, the one thing that's interesting is I find email runs across all age groups, but it's a harder audience, right, to earn, right? When you
Yeah.
earn it, yeah, a click in email is worth so much more than a click in display, because someone who clicks on an email has looked at the subject line, looked at the from line, and discerned, I want to look at what this person's saying to me. They've opened the message. The content has delivered on the promise of what was promised in the subject line, and then they've made that decision to click.
Right.
So, it's interesting because, again, you're asking what channels fit what age group, and I think, or what demographics. It's funny. Email is that all around multi-purpose channel that, thanks to the advent of the smartphone, is being consumed, excuse me for that, being consumed more voraciously than ever before. But again, it is a harder media to earn an engagement with.
Yeah.
And, but it does transcend all the demographics.
So anybody that's watching this that happens to be a client of ours will probably already know the answer to this next question because it will be what we're doing for them to some degree. But
Yep.
for those viewers who might be unfamiliar with Claritas or just getting to know who we are as a company, what role does Claritas play in helping marketers create effective acquisition campaigns?
Yep. Well, first of all, it obviously starts with the audiences, right? I mean, that is, you have to start with the audiences. So we help our advertisers build effective audiences to meet their needs. Secondly, I think it also, it goes to the ability to deploy across channels. I mean, a lot of marketing agencies out there are very good at deploying in a single channel, executing mail campaigns, executing, social media campaigns, and that's great. We have specialization across the spectrum, so we can help build that true multi-channel campaign with a very highly refined and targeted audience. And then ultimately, I think it's the ability to provide analytical assessment of the responders, right? It is the ability to go in there, take a look at who responded, identify audiences that our clients may not have even suspected were interested in the brand. And part of the way we build audiences, I will just call out here, is to include small little pockets of previous, of outliers, so that in case we missed or didn't know that a brand, subset may have interest in the product, we can identify them.
Yep.
And then we wrap it all up and refine the audience. Start off at square one again. We redefine the audience based on it, and we just keep revising until we get that perfect mix of audience.
Yeah.
And candidly, there is no perfect mix, right? Because it's factors in the world are always changing who's interested in what your products are, right?
So, yeah. It's marketing across that full circle spectrum, basically.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
And I think, as products age out and, certain groups lose interest and other groups gain interest, we can help our clients identify that. And, one thing that I'm really advocating in the 3 months I've been here is let's go out and help partners identify when they roll a new product out. Let's help them identify who's interested in that product.
Yeah.
Because candidly, they may have a vision for who it is for, but I think any seasoned marketer realizes our instincts are for nothing. We have to test it in the marketplace. So,
right.
Yep.
That kind of puts me into my next question. So sometimes in marketing, we do put the cart before the horse.
Right.
So tell me, why is it important for marketers to make the investment in resources that help them understand their audiences at a granular level before they even think about the channels that they should be using in their campaigns?
Right. Well, Monique, it's funny because I'll say it, the best marketers out there, candidly, are the ones who are least qualified to understand who the audiences are. But part of you being an intelligent marketer means you understand that. My consumption pattern is not what I'm trying to build out for this advertisement, right? So, I think part of this is we test our hypothesis. We may think this applies to 20 to 30-year-olds who are making under 75,000, and we find out it has unusual appeal. I mean, candidly, who would have imagined Crocs would be the appeal to $100,000 plus consumers? To me, they're these are the things that people with mullets wear on the
It's
on
funny
the
you say that. I literally just bought my husband a pair of Crocs yesterday.
Yes, and it's hysterical because if you would have told me 5 years ago that people in New York City would be wearing it, and that's the point. It doesn't matter what I think. We test it out across the audience, and in fact, one of the things that I fault marketers for is the concept that we can accurately define your audience on the initial deployment is so flawed on so many levels, right? So the concept of redefining, constantly redeploying and testing is absolutely integral to what we do. And the real value added shouldn't be we can identify your audience on day one. The real value added is after 30 days, we know exactly who your audience is, and we may help you as an advertiser identify segments you didn't realize you had.
Right.
And that's what allows for effective marketing campaigns. When you find that you're really digging into segments you didn't expect, you then get the opportunity to refine your advertising to match those segments, right? So, that's the value add we have to bring to the table. And I've always said, I mean, anybody who thinks the value is in the beginning is absolutely, totally mistaken.
So I loved reading your quotes in a recent Financial Brand article, which we'll go ahead and link that in the description box below. So if you're watching this and you want to check out what we're talking about, But one thing that kind of stood out to me that you mentioned was despite being the dinosaur of the internet, email is still alive and well. And you talked about it a little bit earlier, but what role does that email dinosaur play in contributing to the prospect consumer purchase journey?
Well, it's funny. I gave a 2000 and I'm going to say four interview to a magazine called Direct Magazine. One of my favorite reporters out there named Chris Oster. God, someone I haven't spoken to until I'd love to. But she asked me at the time, 2004, it was, what is the trajectory of email? And I said, the gut instinct in 2004 was it was, slowly fading out in favor of more, modern, technologies such as social media, instant messaging, blogging, right? And yet in 2007, when the iPhone hit the market, suddenly consuming email almost became a form of instant messaging, right?
Yeah,
Because if your smart device is with you and you can read it on the go, suddenly email isn't something you have to be logged in sitting at a desktop for. And I think, since 2007, the consumption of email, it experienced a massive uptick in consumption and it has not died out since. And I think, what it tells me is two things. Number one, email's not going anywhere. It's a reliable, predictable, very familiar medium. And so,
hmm,
with that said, though, we are consuming more email than ever, but we have a smaller literally a smaller window within which, as marketers, to get our message across.
right.
So that being said, when I refer to it as a dinosaur, the difference is everybody saw the comet coming, but in this case, the comet missed the planet, and I mean the meteor missed the planet entirely, and they didn't go extinct. And the funny thing is, we just have to revise our vision. So it is no longer the 2005 where you can deploy an email, and in 2005, I can tell you, and I'm glad to say I'm pretty sure you're too young to remember this. In 2005, we read every email that was in the inbox because it
Yeah,
was like, oh my God, I got an email. So excited.
yeah,
Now we look at the top 5 or 6 emails on our smartphone. And if it's not there, we shut it off and we move on. And so
hmm,
marketers have to be cognizant that they have a limited window. And number two, because people are on the go, they have to have a subject line that accurately conveys what's in the email, but also resonates in a way that makes the consumer get interested very quickly.
right.
And then I think there has to be a sense of follow up, right, with email. In the old days, you didn't want to over message. I think the notion of over messaging has kind of gone away to some degree, and I'm going to say it to some degree because I'm sure that someone's going to listen to it and say, "Oh no, I get over message all the time," and I'll say it. I get it too. I get it
Yeah,
too. But the concept, that when someone opens an email, we know today that without even using divisive open pixels, that 65% of email is open on smartphones. So
mm,
we have to plan intelligently a retargeting campaign that picks up on that open and acknowledges that, hey, at the end of the day, we're getting people opening on their smartphones. We have to retarget them with the hope of getting them on their desktop, because if they open on a smartphone, they're 66% less likely to convert.
yeah,
So we have to retarget them. So in essence, it is the same medium that's not the same at all that it was in 2005. It's not the same medium. We
right.
have to treat it differently. It is a much more time-based, time-sensitive medium where people aren't going to pay as much attention to your emails as they used to in 2005. So our message to marketers has to be, retarget engagers, because if you're lucky enough that they actually opened your email, get right back in front of them, and to be aware that people aren't going to spend as much time. So, like a display campaign, you do have to retarget because it's going to require that retargeting or amplification, as we talked about earlier. So,
Hmm.
it is a different medium, and it's funny because when some of the concepts, I can tell how old somebody is when I say something like we retarget openers. People go, "Oh, isn't that too much?" Oh, so you're about 50 years old. Okay, that makes perfect sense to me because you're applying the same philosophies we experienced back in the 2005 era. So it's pretty interesting to me.
Yeah.
So
So we've heard and frequently requoted the saying that all channels are not created equal. In this conversation today, you've kind of proved that. But what
yeah,
does that really mean? And are there specific ways that different channels should be evaluated as successful or not for the marketers who are deploying those multi-channel
yeah.
campaigns?
Well, and it's funny because I think we have traditionally looked at email as a click to conversion channel, and I think and I get it. That's the way it's always been done. I do think there has to be some notion, and to this day we view sending an email, commercial email, in to a consumer as digital marketing, not as digital advertising. And part of this I will say is, I look at the different mediums, and I'm sure, Monique, you've actually looked at some of the ads on Instagram. The ads that have the little dots where you can click and you can see
Yeah.
all the different. To me, that is the height of digital advertising, right? The
Right.
ability to look at a product, click it. I mean, this is the stuff we thought about when we used to look at GQs or W Magazine, where you wanted something, you go, God, I wish I could just click on this and order it, right? Because and so to me, I think we have to consider the notion that part of this is getting consumers to be familiar with my brand, to start to think about it, to get it in their normal dialogue. And it's funny because not all channels are equal, but some lend themselves to quicker conversions. Secondly, I think we have to be aware that the concept of driving someone to a site to convert out of email is a little outdated, especially on a smartphone. We have to drive them to a mobile app, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that person clicks on the email, they go to a mobile app. Now that's great, when you already have a relationship, because I'm much more inclined to download the app if I
Right.
have a relationship with someone. Not great for acquisition, so we have to create mobile optimized websites so that they can upload easily, allow for quick forms of prepayment, things like that. I mean, I think we have, when I look at the partners we have, the best advertisers are the ones who have thought it through, not only from the subject line to the creative to clicking through and how do we lubricate the conversion process. Moreover, I think Instagram has magically allowed advertisers to easily load up products, make it as easy as possible. Now, the display ads, I think, they suffer a little more at the hands of digital media. I mean, on the mobile devices, because people aren't doing as much web browsing on there. So now
Right.
you're looking at advertising within social media. So I think, yeah, not all mediums are the same, but I think when you're thinking about an integrated campaign, that said, they're also interconnected. It's hard to identify a successful campaign that doesn't incorporate targeting across all the different mediums.
Mm.
So that's, I think, my convoluted answer, Monique, to say I'm not sure how much different they are. I think that they are codependent now more than ever. Because again, while I truly believe people interact within a single channel and tend to stick to it, I don't think we can rely on a pre-knowledge of, hey, John is a Instagram user, Susie's a Facebook user, and Adam is someone who's going to convert over email. We just don't have that possession from
Right.
an acquisition marketing standpoint. So as marketers, we have to treat them as an incorporated, complete approach, and leverage each unique feature within each channel. If
Mm-hmm.
that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense, I don't
Fair
know.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, all right, Quinn, I just have one more question for you because we're getting to the end of the time that we have for today. But we've noticed among our own clients and those that are evaluating us as their data partners or providers that measurement and attribution, they continue to be something that marketers across all industries are really interested in. But for those who don't know how to accurately measure their campaigns or don't know where to start in the process, is there any advice you can give for them?
Yeah, so I mean, this is an interesting question. Look, an attribution is probably it has been the single most complex question. It is, it's the chicken or the egg question, philosophical question of online advertising. And I think part of what we have to do here is, start with is identifying an accurate audience, work with your advertisers to, effectively, do an attribution after deployment so that we can effectively say, hey, this is the audience we targeted. These are the channels we targeted them in. And, work to build an, accurate pixeling of the pages so we can see where they came in from, what channels they were driven from.
Hmm.
And I think it requires cooperation. So I'm going to say, let's say it starts with identified audience, right?
Yeah.
It goes on to pixeling of the pages within the process on the advertiser site, so we can identify where we're driving consumers to, and so we can identify that they came from a certain campaign.
Hmm.
And finally, it requires post campaign analytics that are cooperative. I think adversarial attribution, and I don't mean that you're necessarily fighting an advertising partner, but where it's not open and transparent, makes it more difficult to build an accurate picture of attribution. I think again, it starts from the audience building and goes all the way to the end. I think it requires a lot of good partnership. And I'll say this: I don't know that I've actually to this date heard somebody come to me and say, I've got a great attribution plan.
Mm,
Some people look at first touch, some people look at last touch, some
yeah.
people, will only credit where they can actually show it tied to a pixel. I mean, it's bizarre. And I think it is a much more complex question than any one of those. And it's a little bit of all of those, right? We need to be able to tie it to all the points in between. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So I hope that answers the question. I know I will just say this though: anybody who struggles with the concept of attribution is not alone in this process. So
Yeah. I, and kind of just to add to that, we do have a couple blogs that go right along with what you just said. So imagine that.
yeah,
So I'll see if I can grab those links as well, and I'll put them in the description as well.
beautiful,
But
beautiful.
Quinn,
Well, hey, I've enjoyed this, Monique. It's been
yeah,
great.
thank you so much for joining me today.
All right, well, beautiful. I appreciate it.
All right. So I know the team has you really busy, but it is always great to get the insight from experts in the field. So be fair warned that I'm probably going to be knocking on your virtual door again for a podcast in the future.
Well, like I said to Court, I love this, so I'm glad we're doing this. This would be a lot of fun, and thank you. Yeah, I appreciate not only your help on this, but I appreciate your help on the article. I enjoyed that.
Of
So,
course. We hope those of you that are watching us at home or in the office found this fireside chat to be helpful in understanding the critical elements like audience selection of a successful acquisition campaign and knowing how various channels play different roles in influencing consumer behavior. So, we also hope that you understand a little bit more about how we at Claritas can partner with you to initiate those acquisition campaigns, regardless of channel. To learn even more or to connect with us directly, visit our website at www.claritas.com. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you sometime soon with a brand new Fireside Chat.